Morning guys, Moorhuhn here. Today we are taking a look at the second part of my Rush Echo overview and tier list. Today we are taking a look at weapon power Rush Echoes. So let's see what's in the mix. We are talking about Aturach, Azaar, Brel, Commander Creed, Hollowlord Vendraal, Knightsmaw, Slyv'r, the First, Renegade and the Unraveled. So before we go right into, I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite echo already? If yes, let me know which one it is and on what character you like to use it. My personal favorite is Aturach, but let's see why. First of all, Aturach the Deathless. Aturach triggers on dealing physical damage. This hits in an AoE around the target you are hitting with physical damage at any range. It deals a big chunk of damage, has a low cooldown, and has great combo potential with Slyv'r. Does also hit wherever you hit the enemy, so when you're running rune cannons, you have a very high range big axe slam, which is quite cool. So Aturach, pretty fun. Let's take a look at Azaar, Storm of Blades. Well, not as much fun, because it triggers on damaging the enemy that damaged you last. So before you even can use it, you have to be hit, which is quite annoying, and on some bosses getting hit is something you really do not want to do, because some bosses just hit so hard that you want to avoid those at all costs. Also, it is fairly unreliable outside of bosses, because like you're damaging an enemy and just before that some other guy did damage you and your echo just doesn't trigger. It does also not have an AoE component, which means it's a purely single target focused echo. Though it does have a very low cooldown, one of the lowest cooldowns of all echoes, if not the lowest. I think it has the lowest. The damage is okay-ish, so it's actually not that bad if you get to trigger it a lot, but it can be tricky at times, so not one of my favorites. Then Brel, Storm of Thorns is a fairly interesting one. Though it does trigger on shooting enemies after a hotspot reload, which is very controllable, though will happen all the time when you're running with weapons, because you should always go with a hotspot reload due to the buffs you profit from. And then it does have an okay or good AoE coverage, even like you can shoot through a lot of enemies with it, but the arrows do have very low damage per hit. So it mostly is useful to trigger something with the multi-hits, like the energy, like the generation from Laura. For that, for example, it is very potent. Then let's take a look at Commander Creed. Commander Creed triggers on a combo finisher or eagle eye shot. It hits the target at any range and has a decent AoE around the target. And overall it is very similar to Aturach, just with like a third of the damage. So it does have very low damage and the same cooldown as Aturach, so technically it's just a worse Aturach. You could combine these two for like a stronger proc, but generally Commander Creed just isn't that great, I think. For Hollowlord Vendraal though, this one is very interesting, because it triggers when you use a weapon ability while having a Wayfinder ability ready. So this should be whenever you're using ability, because most of the time you have something ready. At the moment you activate it, your next 3 abilities will trigger the Hollowlord Vendraal damage. There comes a fist slamming down, and it has a decent AoE and huge damage. The damage per slam is slightly lower than Aturach, but it does slam 3 times, which combines to the by far highest damage of all of the weapon power Rush Echoes. Though it does have twice the cooldown of Aturach, means that when you have the perfect triggers, then Aturach would deal more damage in the long run. But Hollowlord Vendraal, very high burst. And it's interesting for like hybrid or crit builds, because you just want to deal damage with abilities and then have an additional slam that just slams down and is very potent in dealing damage with crit scaling. Then let's see Knightsmaw, and I have talked about Knightsmaw in the last and I won't do him this. It's still as bad. We won't talk about it. Fuck that shit. Don't use it. I'm sorry. Then Slyv'r is a very interesting one. It's more on the utility side because it triggers when dodging and you're going invisible. Though the problem with that is that, or for me at least, that I dodge all the time. So whenever I'm in combat, dash, and it instantly triggers. Like, there is very, very cool combo potential because while you're invisible, your next hit has a very, very highly increased damage, like 500% increased weapon power for the next hit. So this does not work with multi-hits. So if you're like having something that hits 5 times, only the first hit gets increased or boosted. So you want to combine this with another strong hitting hit or ability, like with Aturach or with a rune cannon. Both of these do work well and have a very, very high damage potential. Though for Aturach it can be slightly difficult because you have to hit the enemy while you're in combat to trigger Aturach, and then you have to dash out to get invisible while Aturach Slam is coming down, but before the damage applies, so that the bonus damage of Slyv'r applies to the slamming hit. This can lead to very, very big damage numbers and nice breaks and, well, a fun big slam, though it is fairly tricky, and due to both of these having different cooldown with 20 and 30 seconds, it might be difficult to get this combo off more than once per fight. So can be difficult, but it's very fun when it does work. Also, the invisibility can be quite useful in some fights, though as I said, it is very random because it comes up and I'm just dashing away and I'm invisible, but I'm attacking while dashing right after, and the invisibility is over instantly and does nothing for me. So kinda tricky to use. Well, yes, that's it pretty much. Kinda tricky to use. Still very good. Then we have the first. Still the same thing. You trigger it by double jumping, gain ability power, weapon power, resilience for 15 seconds. It's a good boost, especially for hybrid builds. Has a good uptime despite its long cooldown due to the 15 seconds duration. And overall is a very reliable and strong buff echo for pretty much any build really. Aside from crit focus builds, but anything that focus either weapon or ability power. Very, very good echo here. And then we have the Renegade, still one of my favorites. I explained in the last video long, so here we do short. It's triggered by a slam attack, or by a heavy slam attack. It deals physical damage in the center, which for the weapon ability, for the weapon power part is the more important one. Has the ability damage donut around, and it multi-hits a lot. So very strong on hybrid and crit builds, and pretty good on stuff like Venomous and Laura and stuff like that. So very, 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 very good echo. Still my absolute favorite out of pretty much all echoes, aside from maybe Equilibrium. But yeah, extremely cool. And yes, let's take a look at the Unraveled, and it's just Commander Creed in worse. Because it is literally just Commander Creed. It's a void-imbued variant of Commander Creed. So when you put Unraveled and Commander Creed in your loadout, it even says, dude, you have the same echo twice. Please do not do that. It does not work. And it does not. Also, the Unraveled does not have an upgrade like Commander Creed has, and is just the normal Commander Creed echo. So it's very, very bad and should never be used ever. Well, yes, that's it. So let's take a look at my personal tier list. Starting out strong with Aturach and the Renegade in the S+ tier. These are just extremely strong. Can be used in pretty much any weapon power build. Just very, very good. Have a very good damage. As I said, I just like them. Then for the S tier we have Hollowlord Vendraal and Slyv'r. These could technically be an S+, but the Vendraal has a slightly too long cooldown for my liking, and Slyv'r is a bit unreliable at times, so slightly below the other two here. Then we've got the first in the A tier. It's just a very reliable buff, very strong, could be used, it's pretty good. Azaar, Storm of Blades, technically has good damage, but the way to apply it is just not my type of gameplay, and I just don't feel like it's doing what I wanted to do, so it has to be B here. Then we have Brel, Storm of Thorns. It's just not good. Way too low damage, though for just lower. I've put it in C tier, otherwise it probably would have been ended up in D. So there we go. Then Command Agreed, too low damage. It's just not good. C tier as well. And then we've got Nightmare in D tier and Unraveled in D tier. Nightmare actually in Nightmare tier because fuck that shit. But Unraveled pretty much the same as Nightmare, honestly. It's just not good and should never be used. So here we go with the tier list. Then that's pretty much everything. Part 3 will cover all of the utility echoes. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, and I will drop down the tier list in the comments so you can make your own list if you have another opinion, and let me know, because I'm very interested in what you have to say. So thanks for watching and see you in the next one.